As reported on the 22nd of April, a colossal explosion shook Vladimir Oblast, Russia, in what may be the most spectacular military disaster or the most daring Ukrainian strike of the year so far. The 51st Arsenal, a vast ammunition depot located near the village of Barsovo, erupted in flames, leaving locals in stunned disbelief. This facility is operated by Russia's main missile and artillery directorate, GRAU, which is responsible for overseeing the country's largest and most critical weapons storage sites, Euromaidan Press reports. This wasn't a small arms cache we're talking about. The 51st Arsenal was a fortress of concrete bunkers holding an estimated 264,000 tons of Russia's deadliest hardware, including missiles, drones, and artillery shells. In an instant, hundreds of thousands of munitions vanished from Russia's war inventory in a fiery explosion that was anything but ordinary. Defense analyst Yan Matveev, who has been closely tracking the destruction of Russian ammunition depots, points out that this is just the latest in a series of devastating hits targeting Russia's stockpiles, a campaign that began last year. The massive detonation at the 51st Arsenal wasn't just a one-and-done explosion. Videos from the scene show intense secondary blasts as shells caught in the initial fireball continued to cook off for hours. Even worse, unexploded munitions went flying in all directions, creating a deadly hazard zone that forced Russian authorities to evacuate 7 entire towns, 12 dacha villages, and a military unit. The 51st Arsenal sits just 64 kilometers from Moscow, inside Russia's most sophisticated air defense network, explains Yan Matveev to Euromaidan Press. After embarrassing breaches in 2023, they fortified this area with overlapping defense systems, creating an almost impenetrable shield. Since 2024, Ukraine has methodically targeted Russian ammunition stockpiles, with significant explosions continuing to shake the country in 2025. Here's a closer look at some of the most devastating hits and their implications for Russia's increasingly strained supply situation. The destruction of the 107th GRAU arsenal in Toropets, Tver Oblast, in September 2024 remains one of the most significant to date. This monster facility packed 30,000 tons of shells, rockets, guided bombs, and fuel, most now just smouldering craters on satellite imagery. Even the newest storage bunkers, supposedly designed to survive nuclear strikes, didn't stand a chance, says Matveev. Ukrainian drones reduced these indestructible fortresses to rubble. Beyond the massive GRAU arsenals, Ukrainian forces have methodically targeted smaller but strategically crucial ammunition depots, particularly those at Russian airfields where bombs, missiles, and aircraft munitions are stored. Hitting ammunition stockpiles has always been a military priority, typically executed with expensive airstrikes and cruise missiles, Euromaidan Press says. Ukraine, working with limited resources, revolutionized this approach by transforming commercial drones into deep strike weapons capable of penetrating hundreds of kilometers into Russian territory with deadly accuracy.
U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met on Saturday before the funeral service for Pope Francis in the Vatican, according to Zelensky's press office. According to Associated Press, White House Communications Director Stephen Chung confirmed the meeting and said they met privately today and had a very productive discussion. More details about the meeting will follow, he said. Shortly after arriving in Rome last Friday, Trump said on social media that Ukraine and Russia should meet for very high-level talks on ending the 3-year war sparked by Russia's invasion. His envoy, Steve Witkoff, met with Russian President Vladimir Putin earlier Friday, and Trump said both sides were very close to a deal. U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky both attended the funeral of Pope Francis at St. Peter's Square at the Vatican in front row on Saturday. According to Associated Press, Pope Francis is being laid to rest Saturday in ceremony consistent with his priorities as Pope and personal wishes as pastor. Presidents and princes will attend the funeral at St. Peter's Square, but ordinary faithful and a group of 40 migrants, prisoners, homeless and transgender people will be the privileged ones to welcome him to his final resting place at the St. Mary Major Basilica across town where he loved to go to pray. The Mass at St. Peter's will be attended by world leaders, including U.S. President Donald Trump, and followed by a coffin procession to St. Mary Major with camera positions along its route. Among the world leaders attending, U.S. President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania, French President Emmanuel Macron, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, UK's Prince William, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, First Lady Alina Zelenska, President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen, Italian President Sergio Mattarella, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, German Parliament Speaker Julia Klöckner, Polish President Andrzej Duda and the First Lady, Agata Kornhauser-Duda, Austrian President Alexander van der Bellen, Austrian Chancellor Christian Stocker, Swiss President Karen Keller-Sutter, Croatian President Zoran Milanovic, Croatian Prime Minister Andrej Plenković, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos, Hungarian President Thomas Suliak, Irish President Michael D. Higgins, Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin, Irish Deputy Prime Minister Simon Harris, Kosovo President Vjosa Osmani Sadriu, Spanish King Felipe VI and Queen Letizia, Hungarian politician Peter Magyar, Kenya President William Ruto and former U.S. President Joe Biden.